Trains roll through Netmizaaggamig all the time. But this train is different. Once a year, the CPKC holiday train stops here. Now that the cold of December is set in, it's time for the place also known as Pick Mobert First Nation to get in the holiday spirit. Not that folks here need much of an excuse. When you're a small community of about 400 people, there's not much choice but to be tight-knit.
Why didn't you dress better?
Edgar Desmoulin grew up here. He's also part of a team of community support personnel whose job is to assist folks in need, whether it's helping out at the holiday train or intervening in a crisis.
When it's a bad day here, it's a hard day. When the tough gets going, it gets really going. It's like a train. You don't stop it.
Here, Edgar's train analogy hits close to home. The tracks cut right through this town. Like stitches, they never quite heal over.
That was the hardest part of this job, trying to get people off these tracks.
In the last few years, 2 community members have died by suicide on this stretch of railroad. But folks like Edgar are working to prevent that from happening again. In late 2023, he had some success.
It was a long, hard-fought thing to do. It took us an hour and a half for us to get them off.
It helps that the community 4 hours east of Thunder Bay can now call ahead to stop trains, buying frontline workers like Edgar precious time to talk people down. Edgar says being from the community makes it easier, in some ways.
Easier and harder at the exact same time because we're all really tight people together, When something goes wrong, we all feel it. When something goes good, we all feel it. But I thought I'd seen him make one yesterday too.
Edgar says he's grateful for this job, but the reality is that in situations like mental health crises, he can sometimes be the last line of defense. Because like many First Nations, this Ojibwe community does not have a full-time police service. Sergeant Fiona Duncan's night started with having to borrow a truck from the OPP. It's not uncommon for the Anishinaabeg Police Service to be short of vehicles. Recently promoted, she's come to Netmizaaggamig Nishnabeg after many years at the Fort William detachment. Now she's hoping to get settled before the overnight Friday shift gets busy.
So we're just walking into our temporary office on Pick Mobert. And so clearly it's just in the process of being set up. This is kind of where we're at. I haven't been here for a while, so I'm not sure what's going on with the debris in here.
Duncan is the kind of person who rolls with the punches. She's quick to explain that the Band Council did the team a solid by finding them a space to work out of on short notice.
Just gonna get some of these out of the way so we can actually have a seat.
In Ontario, the Anishinaabeg Police Service, or APS, polices 16 First Nations. Some detachments serve multiple communities. Until recently, the APS detachment serving Netmizaaggamig Nishnabeg was based in a different community, about 75 kilometers away, meaning it could take 45 minutes or more to respond to emergency calls here. And there have been many.
I absolutely understand why people are frustrated. I mean, there has not been enough police presence in this community.
2024 saw stabbings, home invasions, and out-of-town drug dealers moving into the territory. In November, the Band Council declared a state of emergency because of organized crime, addiction, and violence. Hence, the rush to move a detachment into the community.
I don't feel like we are adequately serving our communities because we don't have enough bodies to work 24/7. It's not fair to the communities that we police, and it's not fair to the officers.
Duncan hopes to be part of the solution here. For almost 7 years, she has been patrolling with APS. But this is one of her first overnight shifts in Netmizaaggamig Nishnabeg. She knows she'll mostly be meeting people in less than ideal circumstances. One of the night's first calls, a next of kin notification.
We're really sorry for your loss, okay? But we have some details to share with you.
Out of respect for the family, APTN Investigates did not film this interaction.
Are you here by yourself? Do you need victim services or anything?
Number 102 for a threats call.
Next of kin notifications have always been a part of this job, but telling a parent about their child's death by suspected drug use has become far too common. Not just here, but everywhere. It may often be difficult, but Duncan says building relationships with people is her favorite part of the job.
Sometimes you don't meet them at the best time in their life, and you kind of want to turn that around for them. Try what can you do to try to turn this moment around for them? So, and I think just from an initial terrible incident that somebody suffers, I think it's important in building that relationship to follow up with them, and when they're having a good moment. We'll reconvene, we'll just keep an eye on that truck and where it is.
This night shift coincides with the 10th day since the state of emergency has been called. Duncan and her colleagues are making a point of, quote, flying the colors. The idea is to make community members feel safe, but also send a warning to anyone with bad intentions.
I understand that when people call us, they're probably not having the best days. It's not them that we're dealing with, it's just them when they're having a bad time. And that's why we're called, because unfortunately nobody calls the police when they're having fun. So.
Logan Lewis is a Netmizaaggamig Nishnabeg band member.
I do care about what happens here. It's kind of hard to turn it off when I'm not working.
This is his third month on the job.
For 402? Yeah. 100 B12 Bob 402.
Because he's still new to the job, Lewis is being trained by a familiar face in the community.
I grew up around policing. My dad was a police officer since 1992. Everyone, or all the older generation for sure, remembers my dad, remembers the type of person he was, and what he did for the communities.
For 3 years, Constable Chris Palmer has policed this community. And sometimes the Ojibwe Cree man gets grief for not being as forgiving as his dad.
Yeah, definitely get a lot of flack, but my main goal is still here to help people. You know, sometimes you have to arrest people, that's the job, and I try to treat everyone with respect and dignity.
Palmer and the APS team try to practice what's referred to as community policing, where they aim to form trust and partnerships with the community to help make it safer. But Palmer says that was easier in his dad's day, when the crime rate wasn't so high and the lack of manpower wasn't so crippling.
We're on our way to follow up with a threats occurrence from earlier today when there's no Pick Mobert officer logged on.
Palmer and Lewis sometimes find themselves checking up on things that were called in hours ago. The intention is there, but they're too late to do anything about the alleged threat.
The big issue we have a lot of the times is that when we go to someone's house to follow up, because there was no one on duty when the call came in, they're not home. And then another big issue is that not a lot of people have phones here, so hard to track down.
The lack of manpower is the kind of thing that diminishes trust in the police and frustrates officers to no end.
I mean, you could basically work around the clock if you wanted. It's not really healthy for the officers to be operating like that. And I mean, I know some officers that do, 20 to 30-hour shifts.
When you only have 3 officers to police a community struggling with social issues, it can lead to ugly situations. Burnt out officers. No backup for dangerous calls. Crimes going unpunished or even unreported.
We need to be here to serve our communities, no different than any other police service in the province or in the country.
So what's preventing Indigenous police forces across Canada from being properly funded?
First Nation policing exists for pennies on the dollar in comparison.
Unlike other police in Canada, Indigenous police are not legally considered an essential service, which means every few years they have to fight Canadian and provincial governments for every penny. And rarely, if ever, do they get enough to do their jobs.
I have seen firsthand the terrible consequences of Canada's inaction. Our officers and civilian staff are asked to do more with less, and our community members suffer the consequences.
We need to be recognized for the services that we provide.
They made an apology, but we want action. We have solutions in the report.
The issue has been the subject of many reports, including an MMIWG National Inquiry call to justice. Since 2021, Canada has been promising to fix it. The question on many minds is, what is taking so long? Just south of Montreal sits Kahnawake, Mohawk Territory. Population, 8,000. Being so close to a metropolis has its advantages, but it also brings big city problems.
You can see we set an officer here every morning, a peacekeeper.
Early every weekday morning, the Kahnawake peacekeepers head out to police the borders of their community.
So what we do every morning is we close the road. It's only open to residents of Kahnawake and people who work on the territory of Kahnawake. As you see, they're slowing down, which is good. We appreciate that. We don't like speeding vehicles roaring through here.
For 16 years, Kyle Zachary has been a peacekeeper. And like the vast majority of the 36 peacekeepers, he's from Kahnawake.
How many? You're 3 today?
We're 3 today.
Yeah.
On this morning, Kyle's been tasked with escorting APTN around Kahnawake's 3 main entry points. So he's leaving the roadblocks to the rest of the team. At least that was the plan, until this happened.
So we're going to catch up with a vehicle that didn't stop at the roadblock. Oh, it's the old excuse, I'm going to get gas. Just let me know if everything's valid, I'm going to be turning them around.
The reason folks are willing to blow past police checkpoints in Kahnawake isn't cheaper gas, but rather this.
It's early, it's still 6:20 in the morning, so usually by 7:30, 8 o'clock it really gets jam-packed in here.
The Mercier Bridge connects many suburbs on the south shore of Montreal to the city, and it's right smack in the middle of Kahnawake's territory. To get to the bridge quicker, desperate morning commuters will try to take shortcuts through Kahnawake. So a police force meant to serve a population of 8,000 finds itself managing about 130,000 cars passing through its land every weekday. And with traffic congestion comes other problems.
What the hell?
What happened?
The light went green. The freaking guy kept swerving at me all the way up.
A case of road rage, but this is an example of how our positions here during morning traffic are very tentative. Now the officer who was posted here, he's had to leave his post to go and look for this other vehicle that was involved in the road rage incident. I'll stop the lane for you.
Kyle says the Kahnawake peacekeepers pride themselves on being courteous and professional. But managing the traffic and tempers of non-Kahnawake residents isn't the reason folks sign up for this job.
It can be frustrating at times, and often the community pays the price for it. The residents living on 207 trying to get to work, trying to get their kids on the bus. The traffic in the morning is a problem for a lot of people.
Compared to Netmizaaggamig, the social issues in Kahnawake are not nearly as severe. But in 2024, assaults and mental health calls rose substantially. They also have issues with organized crime. So at the end of the day, even though they're better staffed than most First Nations police, the Kahnawake peacekeepers say they are just treading water.
So every day is really busy.
For 25 years, Dwayne Zachary has been a Kahnawake peacekeeper. 21 have been as chief peacekeeper.
And if you look at this one, these are some of my favorite ones.
He's also served as president of the First Nations Chiefs of Police Association.
Like you could see in there also, there's Ugwazusney Mohawk Police, Six Nations Police. Those are all sister communities of ours.
In addition, he's the current vice president of the Quebec Association of First Nations and Inuit Police Directors. So he's able to speak with authority on how First Nation policing is funded.
Why are we always kind of put on the back burner? Why are we always, kind of regarded with this benign neglect attitude? We are still regarded as a program. So basically what that means is however long our policing agreements are signed for, that's as long as we exist.
Zachary is referring to the First Nations and Inuit Policing Program. Created in 1991 and last updated in 1996, the program's goal is to fund police services in Indigenous communities. 52% of the funding comes from the federal government, with the remaining 48% being provided by the province.
There's been very minimal investment in the First Nation policing in over 30 years.
In December, during the AFN Special Assembly, a press conference was held to shine a light on First Nations police funding. Anishinaabeg Police Services Chief Jeff Skye didn't pull any punches.
They tell us how many officers we need in our communities. Whereas any other police service, they put a proposal in, this is how much we need based on our crime, our calls for service, it's on public safety to fix this.
Skye is a part of the Indigenous Police Chiefs Association of Ontario, who have filed a human rights complaint against Public Safety Canada concerning funding First Nations policing. The complaint accuses Public Safety Canada of, quote, systemic discrimination. It also alleges that Canada uses bad faith negotiation tactics, such as presenting pre-written funding agreements that have little to no input from the First Nation.
For some communities, like the last minute, they don't have time to say no sometimes, and sometimes they're signing an agreement that may not be better, but they have no choice because they have to keep the lights on and they have to keep the door open.
First Nations police chiefs aren't the only ones sounding the alarm. In February of 2024, the Auditor General of Canada released a damning report finding that Public Safety Canada's handling of the funding program had poor financial management.
Our community is being grounded down by systemic neglect, chronic underfunding of essential services, and a paralyzing lack of action from those with the power and resources to help.
Louis Kwissawa is the chief of Netmizaaggamig Nishnabeg. About 3 weeks after he declared a state of emergency in his community, he attended the AFN Special Assembly. There, he heard Justin Trudeau say this.
We need to do better collectively. I know we are engaging on that particular subject and as well continuing the important conversations on developing First Nations policing so that you can be directly in control of your community's safety.
We need Canada and Ontario to stop passing responsibility back and forth and take action.
Kwissawa's point is raised in the Auditor General's report, where it stated that Public Safety Canada relied on the province's or territory's readiness to fund their share of the program. Meaning that, when it comes to funding, Canada lets the provinces, who have jurisdiction over policing, set the funding benchmark.
As far as the provinces go, or the province of Quebec for that matter, we haven't had very many meaningful, in-depth discussions about or what First Nation policing would look like as an essential service.
In 2021, Trudeau gave then Public Safety Minister Marco Mendicino a mandate to create legislation to make First Nations and Inuit policing an essential service, meaning they would receive more consistent, flexible funding to address First Nations specific needs.
Becoming recognized as an essential service, it may not solve all of these problems, but it'll definitely put us in a better position to be able to address the issues that are happening within our communities.
But after 3 years of consultations and reports, the legislation remains in limbo. Meanwhile, internal documents show Public Safety Canada trying to strike an uneasy balance. In 2023, talks stalled after the AFN balked at First Nations' full jurisdiction over policing not being recognized. Public Safety Canada then suggested a workaround on the sovereignty issue. In a letter, Public Safety Canada affirmed that they were prepared to hold exploratory discussions on self-determination and First Nations jurisdiction over community safety and security via a separate process. But in February of 2024, a memo to the Minister of Public Safety says that provinces need to be assured that the mandate does not include recognizing First Nations' inherent rights and jurisdiction over policing.
The federal government, the provinces, they need to recognize and they need to make changes to their policies to be able to adapt to what our needs are. They need to make the changes, not us.
Public Safety Canada declined to do an interview for the story. In a statement, they say, Public Safety Canada has intensified efforts to address the findings in the Auditor General's report. When asked about addressing First Nations concerns about jurisdiction over policing via a separate process, Public Safety says they continue to evolve through negotiations of self-government agreements and via the development of the Indigenous Justice Strategy.
With the lack of policing, we had to take matters into our own hands to bring some type of security to our First Nations.
Kwisawa says his community has incurred $5 million of debt in the last few years paying for things like private security, security cameras, and license plate readers. Money he would have rather spent elsewhere.
Funding for education, adequate homes, good addiction programs, recovery centers. We need all of that. We have the capacity to do it. We're not asking the federal or provincial government to fix it for us. We're asking them to help us because we can do it.
A lot of stuff going on here.
A lot of stuff going around.
Some of that money has gone to an Indigenous-owned security company named ISN Masqua, who hired Edgar Desmoulin as a community support worker.
What do you take in your coffee, cuz?
Triple, please.
Yep, I got you.
When Edgar isn't out on a call, he works out of the recreation center, where people know with him, they'll find a sympathetic ear. Edgar's cousin, Georgina Desmoulin, can attest.
And they'll give you such a safe, loving, compassionate spot to be vulnerable. I've been on this journey in recovery since I was 19 years old. I've relapsed a few times throughout my journeys. I've had long stints of recovery, and this last one, I just couldn't get sober. I would get 2 months, 3 months, and I just couldn't get up. The trauma and the drama happening in the reserve was too much.
Now Georgina is not only staying sober, she works as a frontline worker for the community.
A lot of people take to me much more easier because they see me walk through all the hard times and all the grit and all the dysfunction.
Ultimately, the Georginas and Edgars of the world are part of the long-term solution to the social issues in Netmizaaggamig, Nishnabeg. But the intergenerational traumas of colonialism will not be fixed overnight. And until they are, most agree that there will need to be a strong police presence to complement social services in First Nations communities. Be it as the tip of the spear, prevention, or outreach.
We're going to go do a compliance check right now on a male that has conditions to be in his residence between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m.
You're the new sergeant?
I'm the new sergeant, I'm Fiona.
Probably get to know me pretty well there.
I hope not.
I hope not either, but...
I hope so, but I hope not in a bad way.
The hope is that Indigenous communities will have the same policing services as anywhere else in Canada, except molded in their values and image. Some might say it's essential.